Legend, an optimistic young man, always harbored the ambition of becoming a celebrated adventurer, hoping to secure a life of opulence for his family. To fulfill this aspiration, he departed his humble village for the city, intending to enroll as an adventurer. However, life in this world, where a goddess had brought forth 9 distinct races, proved challenging for him. Humans, unfortunately, were deemed the most inferior among these races, consistently facing prejudice and discrimination, a reality Light soon encountered firsthand. Upon his arrival in the city, a baseman adventurer brusquely ordered him to clear the path, to which Light called only over an apology. Despite not actually obstructing Anion, Light found himself apologizing. Later, upon reaching the guild, he enrolled as an adventurer, and the receptionist informed him that novice like himself were initially assigned the errand. She then inquired if he possessed any special ability that might influence his evaluation. A question Light enthusiastically confirmed. He informed her that his power was unlimited gacha, allowing him to conjure various items. Realizing a verbal description would not suffice, Light opted to demonstrate. He materialized his gacha device and promptly activated it. The mechanism dispensed a fork card, and as Light unfolded it, a fork appeared on the table. However, the utensil was completely warped, causing Light to become distressed. He quickly assured the receptionist that results typically turned out more favorably. He promptly employed his ability as humor themes, but the outcome was identical. He procured a decayed apple and a stale, moldy loaf of bread. This left the receptionist thoroughly persuaded that this incompetent individual merited nothing more than an F-runner. Light readily accepted it, then inquired if an immediate task were available for him. The receptionist directed him to the notice board displaying all the simple assignment. However, Light as visible uneasy upon seeing it Madahar discerned that he was illiterate. This, she mused, was unsurprising, given the generally low literacy rates among humans, in addition to his apparent incompetence. She then informed him he could undertake rudimentary tasks such as transporting stone and collecting timber. These tasks, however, offered significantly lower compensation than other jobs. Light agreed, and after a day of toiling diligently, he earned just enough funds to secure a room. He still had to utilize his gacha ability for sustenance, yet he remains optimistic about his prospects. Nevertheless, a group of basemen thugs had different intentions, deliberately obstructing his path. He intentionally positioned himself so he would collide with them. Their leader immediately began berating Light for the collision and for soiling his attire. Before snatching his purse, Light became frantic, pleading for the return of his money, explaining he would have nowhere to lodge otherwise. However, the lupine figure simply shoved him violently, declaring Light needed to cover his laundry cost. The baseman abandoned Light, sprawled in a mirror, while all onlookers advised him to reside in the squalid quarter with the other humans. Light plunged into utter despair at this point. But then, unexpectedly, a helping hand extended towards Yini. He instinctively grasped the hand of the beautiful elven woman. Mua stood before him. A second later, he comprehended his own hand was covered with grime. Light recoiled, profusely apologizing to the elf for soiling her hand. She reassured him it was all right, promising she wouldn't harm him. However, a lifetime of prejudice and discrimination prevented him from trusting her word. To demonstrate her sincerity, the elven lady abruptly lowered herself and embraced him, laughing Light utterly astonished, even as passers-by ridiculed the elf for debasing herself for a merry human. She then assisted Light in standing up. Behind the elf stood a contingent of individuals from diverse species. They identified themselves as the adventuring group Concord of Tribes, explaining that they were a team composed of all members from each species the goddess had brought forth, and they were currently lacking a human. The best man Garu presented himself initially, followed by the elven woman, Sasha. Sasha then informed Light of their remaining companion, Drago the Dragonauti, Diablo the Demon, Uboro the One, Sion the Dark Elf, and Nano the Dwarf, dan Santor the Centaur. Garu stated he had been specifically seeking a human to finalize their roster, and Sion further elaborated that their group was formed to eradicate racism and establish a society where everyone was afforded equal standing. Light found this incredibly idealistic, almost too good to trade, but he currently declined such a promising opportunity and enthusiastically became a member of the Concord of Three Best. Before long, they embarked on quests, and Light quickly proved to be the most vulnerable member of their team. Drago and Sasha frequently had to rescue him from creatures, cautioning him to be more careful. They emphasized that a single blow from this beast would be fatal. Light expressed regret for his imprudence, while Sasha began checking him for wounds, instructing him to remain at the rear of the group at all times. The other members of the party began to playfully mock Sasha, suggesting she was secretly infatuated with Light and showed significant concern for him. She blushed deeply as she clarified that she viewed him solely as a fellow party member. Leiden, however, perceived himself as unhelpful, feeling he was incapable of anything beyond transporting their gear. But Drago assured him that his excellent was contribution no good. Drago's words genuinely pleased Leiden, but he joyfully accompanied the team deeper into the subterranean labyrinth. They shortly arrived at a cavernous chamber with a single access point. The party members exchanged glances before, concluding it was the ideal location for their ship. Oblivious to their intentions, Light began brewing tea for everyone when Drago came up to him. Drago informed him that he was being dismissed from the party. Light struggled to comprehend the declaration, asking what transgression had led to his removal from the team. The baseman Garu Statli was being dismissed because he had contributed nothing. Subsequently, everyone present began informing Light how incompetent and foolish he was. Even Sasha, to his dismay, displayed revulsion towards him. The other members then began hurling disparagement at both Light and Humankind. Later, initially, assumed this was merely a practical joke. However, they retorted that nobody had the leisure to engage in jesting with an utterly insignificant individual like him. He then inquired why they had acted so kindly towards him up to this point. They responded that it was merely fakening. Drago then explained that their superiors had observed his unlimited gacha ability, believing he might be a maestro. Consequently, he had instructed the Concord of Three Best to closely monitor him, but once they ascertained Light's ability was useless, and he was incapable of becoming a maestro, they issued the command to eliminate him. Sasha, in particular, was extremely glad they were free from the burden of his presence. She explained that if he had genuinely been a maestro, she would have been compelled to with him, and the mere idea repulsed her. Leiden, however, failed to grasp what the term maestro truly signified. Drago then declared they had revealed sufficient information and must eliminate him before other explorers arriving. Garu instantly mimicked Wolverine, unsheathing his metallic talon and employing them to gaslight as countenance. It was only then that Light comprehended he was truly in grave danger. With no apparent escape from this predicament, he fled with all his mecha in utter despair. The prejudiced villains covered, declaring they would not permit his escape. Sasha feared a shaft, piercing his leg. As Light collapsed and began to shriek, the prejudiced Elvenfold remarked that the cries of humans were like music to their ears. Garu resolved to inflict further pain to alleged Mercury, beginning to assault him. However, Drago ordered him to kiss, stating he needed to simulate the woman as demise from a creature ambush. Garu complied with the command and prepared to deliver the killing blow, but Light shuffled onward, virtually fighting for survival. Abruptly, the air beneath him began to radiate like no. Light comprehended he was in the center of a magical transport array, affect Drago also observed. Garu is commanded to swiftly eliminate life, good at teleportation circle activities, whisking life away just in time. Like as predicament doesn't improve. Through Garu's code from the deceitful merchant, the teleportation trap deposits him in an arbitrary dungeon area. Our cat discovery by and creature man certain data. Harry tells his family, pondering what actions led to his betrayal. He reflects on the pleasant treatment he received before their treachery, no comprehending that their amiable demeanor was merely a facade. Their fake kindness was designed to earn his full trust, ultimately revealing their true intention. Then again, he harnesses his fury into a powerful will to survive. Rising to his feet, he vows to exact vengeance upon his tormentors, intending to dismantle them with his own hand. However, before he can utter more expletives, a low growl emanates from behind light. Upon turning, he confronts a level 1,000 monster staring intensely, causing him to instantly panic. The creature appears Mexican, as if from a fable. Light hand grasps that he has been transported to the dungeon as the past level. He must say that Loki would have had an easier time surviving his own party than like those against this beast. Pondering how he could possibly combat it, his man drifts to his unique ability, the ultimate gacha. Opting to take a gamble, he repeatedly taps the gacha button. Abruptly, his seemingly ordinary gift undergoes a dramatic transformation. It evolves into something far exceeding his wildest fantasies. A colossal magic circle materializes beneath him, and the gacha device begins to power up like remains utterly bewildered. However, precisely as the monster lunges, the gacha roll concludes. A level 999 Might Servant materializes, instantly obliterating the beast. The entire ordeal concludes in the blink of an eye. The aura gathering might then approaches him, the host, and instantly mends his injuries. She explains that she couldn't tolerate seeing his smooth skin harmed. Thus she healed him without seeking consent. Light is astonished to find himself completely recovered. Subsequently, the Might inquires about his name. He introduces himself as Light, and upon hearing it, the Might becomes visibly delighted, pledging her allegiance by the sacred Might as code of honor, vowing eternal service until death. Light reassures he that it is acceptable but suggests she reveal her own name first before the legend introduces her stockhaving. Mai, identifying herself as the ever-seeking Might, informs Light that she originated from a super ultra rare card within his unlimited gacha. Legend, however, finds it difficult to accept that a level 999 Might could emerge from what he considers his insignificant gift. Might then requests permission to employ her appraisal skin on his gift to discern its true properties. He promptly grants her consent. Might then utilizes her Sharingan, discovering that his inherent abilities are cloaked by a potent concealment spell. She explains that no one of a lower level than herself can even perceive them. She then informs Light that his ultimate gacha possesses far greater utility than he imagines as the charge it summons. Were heavily influenced by the mana density of his current location. Furthermore, it appears there exists a rarity even beyond May as super ultra rarity, as May elaborates. Even while the surface boasts meager mana density, the dungeon as depths are saturated with it, enabling her summoning. She then comments like as courage. Before venturing into the dungeon as depths unaccompanied, thus unlocking the full potential of his gift. He, however, confesses that he is merely a failure who couldn't even approach the dungeon entrance by himself. There's well Upas recounts his party as betrayal within the dungeon, lamenting their broken promises and how they had fought to forge a world devoid of discrimination, only to deceive him. He then swears to exact vengeance upon them. Mai suddenly embraces him, admitting she cannot fully grasp the depth of his suffering, but assures him she will fulfill his every desire, adding that annihilating those who wronged him will facilitate challenge for her. Nevertheless, Lake informs Ye that she cannot undertake this task, not due to his benevolence, but because he desires to exact revenge personally. This is currently impossible, however, as he is too feeble. He swears to inflict suffering upon all of them before their demise. My then kills before him once more, stating that if he wishes to cultivate sufficient strength for vengeance, she will assist him in achieving that goal. She expresses her belief in his inherent potential, unlike Chan only offer his gratitude, yet he remains unsatisfied with Merillion, the overpowered individual in his retinue. We resolves to further exploit the Dungeon as mana-saturated environment, activating his unlimited gacha once more. He summons additional high Thermide, intending to establish a kingdom that will serve as the foundation for his elaborate revenge. 3 years have elapsed since that pivotal day. Like no precedence over hundreds of miles within a palace he constructed for himself, Mai consistently remains by his side, honoring the foe she made upon their first encounter. All the maids appear utterly captivated by him, cheering enthusiastically, delighted by his acknowledgement. While Mai instructs them to maintain proper decorum, Gaetan exits the castle and proceeds towards the local marketplace, where he is universally dungeon. Johan Underbecks, sacrifice his stall for breakfast. Meanwhile, others inform him of a national shortage of snack food. Like pledges to address the issue promptly, Sogmai advises him not to concern himself with such minor duties. That as you will ensure the logistical challenge is resolved with utmost speed. Leighton comprehends the necessity of establishing a novel system to manage logistics, given that the local population has multiplied several times over the past 3 years. He inquires of Mai regarding the whereabouts of his other legendary summon. Mai responds that Yuki, the best man, is currently occupied with charting map of the region surrounding the dungeons and surveying the forest for potential dangers. Light contemplates the numerous monsters inhabiting the woodlands but acknowledges the world present no challenge to again use. Bestamer such as Yuki. Mai proceeded, stating that the mage is diligently striving to develop unique magic spells in accordance with his ambitious aim. Lee pondered, if it's a Swiss capability to manage this undertaking, jangan the intricate complex design and damage plus aircraft to govern. Light then inquires about Nas, the vampire Knejan, who excels in close combat but is somewhat lacking in other intellectual domains. My response that she assigned her the duty of patrolling the castle ground, a task intended to prevent her from nagging her empty brain and consequently getting into mischief. Legion, however, doesn't seem to mind her presence. As she adds a certain vibrancy to the castle environment, soon after, they return to the fortress, where Light is summoned by Jack. Jack, the final of his 4 legendary summons, asks Light if he is prepared for a training session. Mai appears slightly irritated and instructs Jack to refer to Light by his appropriate title, Master. However, Jack, a self-proclaimed true Sigma, disregards her, dismissing her words as feminist nonsense, and completely ignores her. Light reassures Mai that it's acceptable, explaining that he views Jack as an older brother, and informs Mai that he intends to attend his training session. Now within the training ground, both prepare to spar. With a sudden burst of speed, Light charges towards his summoned companion, delivering a direct punch to Jack's chiseled abdomen. Light as unexpected force shoves him backward. Jack appears impressed by Light's power, asserting that such a blow would have been fatal to an ordinary adventurer. But Hai-chan withstand it, being constructed like a tan and capable of absorbing an immense amount of damage. They then reconvene in the center of the training area. After a brief exchange of blows, Light unleashes a series of attacks that Jack skillfully evades. Concurrently, Nas continues her patrol through the hallways. Nas, in her usual carefree manner, is approached by several other maidens who begin to butter her up, asserting their sense of security. They explain that Nas is constant vigilance and patrolling, ensuring no hidden dangers. Makes them feel protected. Nas is thrilled by this, precisely as the Mites had intended. To execute their plan, they proposed that Nas should personally verify the security of Light's private chambers. Nas considers this an excellent suggestion and proceeds to the bedroom. However, just as she attempts to open the door, Mai steps out from inside. Nas questions Mai's presence in Light's room, noting that he should be at training. Mai instantly begins to blush. Mai asserted that she was merely tidying the room during his absence. Nas then declares her intention to inspect the room for any potential threats, but before Mai-chan protests. Nas steps inside and observes the disheveled bed. With her characteristic simple-mindedness, she remarks that it appears as though someone had been occupying it. She proceeds to sniff the pillows and roll on the mattress, then questions Mai if she deliberately arranged the bed in such a state. Mai seizing the opportunity, decides to leverage her perceived lack of intelligence. She confidently asserted that this is her unique method of making a bed. Nas is quite impressed and inquires if she could also be taught this technique. However, Mai declines, stating that a proprietary trade secret she cannot disclose at this moment. At this point, Nas reveals that the author might had asked her to deliver a message to Mai. She retrieves a parchment and hands it over to Mai. Mai quickly understands that the author might are staging a protest against her for monopolizing Light's private quarters and preventing them from ever cleaning it themselves. Mai reassures Nas not to concern herself, promising to handle the author mites personally. She even offers Nas some loose coins to ensure her silence. Nas gleefully accepts the money and departs. She promptly makes her way to the market, browsing all the edible goods she could purchase with her new funds. Ultimately, she settles on trying fluffy pancakes accompanied by fresh milk. With her decision made, she cheerfully heads back to the castle once more. Upon arriving, she spots Yuki perched on a balcony. Nas inquires if Yuki has completed her task within the force. Exasperated by Nas's antics, Yuki then reveals to her that she has already finished creating the map Mai requested and has returned to deliver it. Nas offers her congratulations before resuming her patrol duties. Nas then proceeds to the throne room. Once inside the opulent gaudy space, she begins to shriek at the top of her lungs, knowing there is no one present to restrain her. Following her outburst, she leaps onto the throne and starts fiddling with it, inadvertently snapping off a wing from an annual statue. 3 feet of Mai's reaction. She hastily reattaches the broken wing in a haphazard fashion and flees for her life, rushing out of the throne room and back into the training grounds. Light and Jack persist in their sparring. Jack then proposes they conclude their training for the day and head to the bath. They soon make their way to the bathing area and unsettled in the enormous bathtub. Jack commends Light for his rapid acquisition of skills, asserting that he has become powerful enough that the majority of creatures found in the Domians. The world poses no challenge to him, implying that very few on the surface could truly contend with him. However, Jack cautions that there remain individuals who would seek to utterly annihilate him given the slightest opportunity. Light's expression turns grave as he reflects on the betrayal he endured 3 years prior, asserting that he will not rest until he has exacted his revenge. Back in Mai's private quarter, she summons the 4 troublesome maids. She confronts them, demanding to know what their issue is, and then reads their letter aloud to them. Faced with Mai herself, the 4 maids fell completely silent. Unable to articulate a response, she offers apologies, insisting it was merely their attempt to show support, knowing Mai is overburdened with work. Mai instructs them not to concern themselves with her workload but rather to concentrate on their own duty. She rejects their plan to clean Light's chamber and, instead, metes out a punishment. This punishment involves ordering him to manually clean the entire hallway leading to the throne room. The maids express surprise, protesting from the corridor is excessively long. May, however, instructs Tim to persevere, explaining that it will occupy their team while she accompanies Lake on a mission. Meanwhile, outside, Nurse is fixated on a shop window. She is admiring a gauntlet she desperately wants the bootlegs defunts to purchase. While there, she unexpectedly encounters Ellen, who inquires about Nurse's intense gaze. Nurse gestures towards the gauntlet, then questions Ali about her daily ritual. Given her responsibility to oversee the ongoing new construction projects, Ali responded that the construction is progressing without issues, prompting her to take a brief respite. Trey quickly descends into an argument about who holds a more significant position with Lake, and who is more essential. Ellie informs Ness that she is directly integrated into the Revengeum Legend is deficient, contrasting Ness's peripheral involvement. Ellie further boasts about a delightful evening she recently spent, sharing a cup of tea with Liger, during which they reviewed their progress. She sent assertive that their next encounter will involve a private dinner show well arranged. Ness declares her own desire to share tea with the master, then informs Ali of her proficiency in close quarters combat, offering her assistance should she ever require it. The Sechan seek her out. Ali smiles, assuring Ness that she will undoubtedly take her opponent over Somedai. With that, Ness resumes her unthinking duties back at the castle. The four men are engrossed in conspiring against Mai, asserting that Mai is no better than a certain infamous, angry, mustachioed man from Germany. They ponder whether to circumvent her authority, then report her to Lei. However, they reconsider, as none wish to injure her fully. Only Mai and the Duchess, that Lei's deep affection for Mai stems from the fact that she was his initial summoner for her, made and that is subsequently to human the social feels memiliki. This implies that Lake and May were entirely alone soldiers in the Dungeons for an entire 2-month period. Overwhelmed with jealousy, they begin rolling on the floor and exhibiting peculiar behaviors, driven by their envy, before resolving to engage in some form of voodoo magic. We sit at a table and begin chanting hoping to eliminate May from the situation. Unluckily for them, May happens to overhear their entire conversation and enters their room, cornering them once more. The mates instantly begin to offer apologies. They assert that they were merely experiencing a touch of jealousy and that they genuinely meant anything the other. May instructs them to chase their strange fantasies, explaining that during the months between her own summoning and Yuki's summoning, Light was entirely preoccupied with mastering every aspect of magic and practicing every martial art called a temple, leaving no time for anything else. This explanation somewhat alleviates the mind's concerns. My then status that she returned because she felt she had been excessively harsh with them. However, she now perceives that she was, in fact, not harsh enough. Consequently, she orders them to clean the throne room as well, reasoning that they clearly possess ample free time to engage in voodoo magic. Completely at Mai's discretion, the maids had no alternative but to comply with her directives, meticulously cleaning the entire throne room. This time, they resolved to remain silent, to prevent any further complications yet. While dusting the throne, the Grand Hired might inadvertently dislodge the fragment of the angel Aswin. The object, shattered by an ace, tumbled to the ground, leaving the mites terrified, convinced of their culpability, and dreading Mai's potential retribution. As dawn broke, Light stepped into the dungeon, discovering Nas, Eloy, and Yuki already present, and awaiting his arrival. They offered them a morning salutation. Ness and Ellie were already engaged in a squabble when, without warning, a creature materialized from the gloom. Light instantly became rigid, identifying it as a hellhound. Despite his newfound strength, the lingering trauma from that past encounter continued to plague him, causing his blood to run cold whenever he encountered the creature. His companions, conversely, remained unfazed, instead growing furious that the hellhound had distrust likely. Nas, in particular, prepared to dismember it. Manuel, Eli requested authorization to exterminate every single hellhound on the planet, and Yuki must abode, whether she could locate hell itself. And lure this creature straight into its deepest chasms. Their combined presence alone caused the monster to whimper and recoil. Understanding its utter inferiority, Lycat, nevertheless, reassured his companion, regaining his own composure before gently approaching the beast and patting its head. He understood that even a jocular command from him won't result in his legendary summoned beings genuinely wiping out the species from existence. He then addressed his group, stating their immediate need to ascend to the surface. As their stream for vengeance was set to commence that very day, meanwhile, on the surface, the beast folk paid homage to the furry individual who had been a member of the group that betrayed Blade, abandoning him to his demise. He appeared to have ascended to the status of a local icon, with individuals practically imploring him to engage in romantic relationship with the striding confidently with his associate. He exuded an air of authority. His gaze then fell upon a human child Magi, Progreffus in search of sustenance. However, the Fury harbored intense racial prejudice, and, without any apparent provocation, chose to violently cast the child acid, warning him to flee and never reappear in that vicinity if he followed his existence. The other beast folk foolishly applauded his action, but their cheers faded as he stepped into the tavern. He claimed the prime setting and instructed his companions to order to their heart's content, explaining that he had amassed considerable wealth that required spending before the tax authorities intervened. While humans suffered from hunger outside, these furs indulged in skewers of mad-pilled hygge and passive practices. The universally lauded him for transforming into an icon for all beastfolk, despite his own birth in squalor, and his ascent from the impoverished districts to become their leader. Whom Everion desired to emulate. He audaciously informed them that achieving his status was no simple feat, as he had perfected the skill of influence, and given that beast folk are inherently predisposed to follow, he merely needed to leverage this trait effectively to live a regal existence. He asserted that the paramount aspect involved discerning wage and therefore shielded substantial profit versus those demanding significant exertion for meager financial and influential return. One of the last intelligent furies inquired whether the achievement he undertook 3 years prior, alongside the concord of 12 party, had proven lucrative. Another fury reprimanded the questioner, and the wolf-beast informed them that, regrettably, the federation that had employed them had bound them beyond oath of confidentiality, thus precluding them from disclosing any details regarding it. He rechallenged it as the most comfortable and satisfying assignment they had ever undertaken, as it merely involved eliminating a single, insignificant human youth, which had subsequently brought him wealth and renown. However, it did trouble him that he never ascertained the portal as destination. Nevertheless, he dismissed an impossibility, however remote, that light should have endured the experience. He pondered the true nature of this maestro, that the Federation was so determined to locate it. Yet, a chill ran down his spine, signaling that delving further into the subject to make a profile. His contemplation was interrupted by a striking young woman, revealed to be Mai, who broke into their conversation and inquired if they could speak. She then asked if he was Garo, the chieftain of the best folk. He took a drink from his goblet before assenting with a nod. Mai then fabricated a story, claiming to have been master-like as personal attendant, who hailed from an aristocratic lineage. Garo was astonished to learn of Lycat's noble background, and mused whether it might have been more advantageous for him had he allowed Lycat to live. Mai persisted in her deception, stating that she had spent the last 3 years seeking light, and all available intelligence had guided her to this nation, where he was last observed with a different group of companions. Garo confirmed his involvement with that very party and that Lake had indeed been among them. This caused my eyes to brim with tears as she continued her fabrication. That she had been informed Lake had perished within the Dumions and had subsequently vanished. Ronans asserted this to be factual, stating Lake had met an ultimately end. However, May requested if he would escort him to that specific seat, as discovering the place where Lake had last drawn breath would offer her some comfort. Garo brusquely demanded to know what benefit he would get, and to his astonishment, May produced a pouch containing 3 solid gold ingots. His surrounding associates were utterly stunned and rendered silent. However, Ju maintains his composure, pondering if this was a cunning snare or if the young woman genuinely desired merely an escort into the subterranean passages. He ultimately agreed to proceed, confident that a solitary human female could not even lay a hand on him, much less present a hidanger. Garo eventually led her to the Dungeons, accompanied by his henchmen as an escort. After many hours of travel, he inquired about May's well-being. May appeared fatigued but managed a smile, asserting her ability to continue. Garo musik admire how such lucrative opportunities consistently seemed to present themselves to him. Planning to seize all her gold and violate her atop legs as resting place, finally, they entered the subterranean chamber where Lake had been abandoned and presumed deceased. Garo then informed May that this was the set of Lake's unfortunate demise. He falsely claimed that a horde of monsters had ambushed them, preventing Lake from escaping to safety, resulting in him being torn apart and subsequently ensnared in a teleportation trap, never to be seen again. May collapsed to her chaos, weeping. Meanwhile, Garo inwardly scoffed at the perceived inferiority of Humana, while seemed incapable of detecting imminent prey. His henchmen began positioning themselves, obstructing the soul escape route, as he callously continued to fabricate tales of his failed attempts to rescue Lake. Just as he prepared to launch his assault, May Aston abruptly shifted as she declared that only the most despicable beings on the planet could deceive an innocent soul like Lake, luring him into a squalid dungeon, and subsequently betray him. She surveyed her surroundings, realizing that had she entered like a service runner, who would never have endured being kicked, shot in the leg with an arrow, and brutally beaten to the brink of death. Garo instantly perceived the danger and recoiled, questioning how on earth this woman possessed such detailed knowledge. His associates appeared bewildered, unaware of the full implications, but Garo understood that the sole individuals privy to the event were the 12 members of his former party and certain high-ranking national figures. He aggressively demanded to know her employer, inquiring if she was an espionage agent dispatched by a rival faction. She responded with a dismissive scoff, asserting that her allegiance was solely to Legend, and no way would confront her fury. The sheer power emanating from her was sufficient to instill terror in him. This reaction startled him, yet he tries to reassure himself that she is merely a lesser human, fit only for exploitation and eventual dismissal. However, her mere glance sends shivers down his spine. He grasps the gravity of the situation, his instincts screaming that his demise is imminent. He may surely perish, as he nagged her but before my crowd striking. Lake's voice emerges from the shadows, instructing her to desist, as he intends to confront Garo alone. Garo dismisses the voice as an illusion, but Lake then steps into view, addressing Garo with the familiarity of a long-lost acquaintance, declaring his presence is for retribution for the actions Garo committed 3 years prior. Garo instantly recovers his bravado, chuckling as he remarks that he never anticipated seeing Lei once more. He then taunts Lei, asserting that a feeble level 15 human is no match for a level 150 raid boss such as himself, delivering the insult with a logi. That he is baffled by Lei's survival, but now he can personally end him and present his corpse as evidence. Legend, which as he inquires if Garo holds no curiosity about Mai's identity or her capability. Garo concedes he is unaware of his small Mai's power, but remains absolutely convinced that insignificant humans could never rival best folk like his kin. He proudly declares that all his subordinates exceed level 130 and will effortlessly overwhelm them. With this, he issues the attack order, and two of his henchmen instantly charge towards light, intent on ending his existence. Yet in the blink of an eye, Mai materializes before them, and their severed heads simultaneously drop to the floor. As their lifeless torsos collapse, she issues a stark warning. Anyon wo dares menaslain will forfeit their head. However, Light instructs her to withdraw and merely secure all escape routes. As he desires to partake in the excitement himself, Garo's followers appear to be losing their resolve. Stunned by the recent spectacle, but Garo attempts to reassure them, asserting that it was merely a deceptive maneuver she employed. Light then questions if Garo genuinely still perceives humans as inferior to them, and if he has ever contemplated the possibility that perhaps the human species may be the most formidable of all races. Garo scoffs at this, flaunting his own level, but Light counters that a level is merely a numerical value, unrelated to his actual power. An individual truly is. Garo, having heard Enoge, charges forward with all his henchmen, launching an assault. Jaber to his asthma, Necromancer Magiana. Before abruptly erupting into a counter-offensive, parrying and striking every single adversary, sending them sprawling. Catching his breath, Light then advances towards Garo, inquiring if he still considers humans to be the weaker species. However, Garo, unable to tolerate such indignity, pushes past his spine and leaps up once more, proclaiming that no human could ever equal him. Following the he tears a magic crystal from his pocket and shatters it on the ground, thereby summoning his familiar, which manifests as a level 500 wolf beast. Light questions if that is the extent of Garo's capabilities, but Garo misinterprets Light's composure as shock and fear, instructing him to begin pleading for his existence. Light merely remains stationary, challenging Garo to attack and vowing not to budge an inch from his current position. Garo, incensed, commands his creature to unleash a blast so potent it could obliterate an entire city, but as the debris settles, his jaw drops in disbelief. He observes Light standing perfectly still, exactly as promised, without a single mark on his person. Light then ridicules him for bestowing such an extravagant title upon his attached, when its sole effect was to stir up dust pointlessly. Garo is rendered speechless, while his henchmen begin to panic. Light then announces that it is now his turn to attack, and proceeds to draw a card, as if in a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! He summons the level 9,000 Ultra Rare Primal Wolf Gotcha, which materializes behind him, shimmering and ethereal. This set leaves the best folk utterly dumbfounded. Light then instructs the wolf goal to eliminate Garo's familiar, but Rentortan unleashing a formidable energy blast. The wolf that merely exhales a gentle breath, the inherent power within this breath, instantly crystallizes Garo's wolf, shattering it into fragments directly before him, leaving Garo utterly powerless. Garo finally snaps, unable to comprehend how his level 500 wolf monster was obliterated in mere seconds. Light, however, asserts that he should have dispatched the monster himself if he had chosen to substantiate this. He unveils his actual level, which is revealed to be the maximum of 90,999. Garo stutters and trembles, protesting that this is inconceivable, as humans typically cap at level 100. Furthermore, if Light were truly the identical human from years past, he would have matured physically by now. Light then discusses that he employs an age regulating ring to prevent his physical development, because he wishes to preserve his current appearance and recall the day he suffered betrayal at the hands of the planet as most despicable individual. Garo then comprehends his inevitable demise, and possesses absolutely no hope of ever overcoming the formidable entity Lei has transformed into. Recognizing his fate is sealed, he resorts to the actions of a true coward. He casts aside his weapons, profusely apologizing for his past deeds, and asserting that the Federation compelled him to act as he did. He insists that even today he harbored no malicious intent and was prepared to reveal the truth to but his subordinates devised him entirely on their own, and coerced him into participation. His underlings are aghast, unable to reconcile his behavior with the individual who was flaunting his ability and power just this morning. He lowers his head, pleading for clemency, and even offers to become Light as personal servant if desired. Loige, nonetheless, remains indifferent and merely questions him about the identity of Maestro and the government as intense determination to locate this individual. Garo truthfully responded that he has no knowledge of who it is, and that the government had simply informed him that the Maestro was likely a human. Light then inquires why they chose to assassinate him once he concluded he was the Maestro. Garo instantly prostrates himself, insisting he genuinely has no idea, and that they were simply following orders. Yet then shifts his gaze towards the remaining henchmen, and questions if they possess AI intelligence that could spare their life. The subordinates all immediately begin asserting that they hold the very information Light seeks. However, my employees have unique ocular ability to discern their falsehood and proceeds to dismember them, splattering blood everywhere, as you proclaims that Anyon Wo there is to live before Light. Will praise bear hand, Egg then redirects his attention to Garo, asking if he believes he stands in chance of victory should he ask to the survive an immediate hour. Garo candidly responded, then he is exceptionally powerful and capable of conquering entire nations single-handedly. However, those nations coalesce, utilizing all the armaments they are currently amassing. Trade he may face considerable difficulty, given that there is merely one individual accompanied by a maid. Light then smiles, stating his desire to present something to Garo, and employs teleportation magic to transport him directly to his personal throne room. Garo is utterly overwhelmed, his men teetering on the brink of madness from the shock. Upon witnessing the vast army Light has assembled, where even the most basic soldier is level 15, alongside 4 mates at level 90,999, and innumerable other forces, was level span from 6,000 to 9,000. Garo is rendered speechless, a single tear tracing up down his face as he comprehends that Light possesses the power to annihilate the entire planet in an instant, effectively elevating him to the status of a deity. She ponders the consequences once the inevitable conflict begins. Several months later, Light finally emerges from the depths of the dungeons. Accompanied by his party, he journeys to his former village, intending to demonstrate to his family that he has, in reality, transformed into an individual powerful enough to provide for them indefinitely. However, upon his eventual arrival at the village, his anticipation, once brimming with happiness and a yearning for home, abruptly transforms into profound shock and terror as he confronts the utter devastation of his village. Rushing towards the ravaged settlement, he finds himself unable to approach the side. Collapsing to the ground in utter despair, Mai and his companions quickly move to console him. They pledge vengeance against those responsible for this atrocity. His sole glimmer of hope, however, stemmed from the realization that, during their search of the village, his family as remaining were conspicuously absent among the other deceased villagers. This absence revealed his persistent hope that his loved ones may have evaded the massacre and could still be controlled somewhere within the nation. Several weeks after the incident, Light resolves to return to the ruined village. He aims to calmly re-evaluate the situation, believing that his previous emotional turmoil might have caused him to overlook crucial information. Details that could shed light on his family's fate, On this journey, he is joined by an armored knight named Gold, and a grey-haired assassin known as Nete. The village's appearance once more evokes a sense of dread within him, yet he manages to maintain his composure, and, aided by his companion, he meticulously prepares graves for the fallen villagers. As he places flowers on the mound, he recognizes with certainty that this was undoubtedly the work of an adventuring party from a different race. Lost in his contemplation, Lake is interrupted by Gold, who begins to grumble about the necessity of departing soon. Otherwise, he would be forced to spend the night exposed to the elements. Nem, growing irritated, retorts that Lake is grieving and deserves ample time to process his sorrow. Gold assures Nem that he will traverse the Highgesty Seapack and plumb the deepest abysses for Lake, but he also acknowledges the imperative to locate a secure and comfortable resting place suitable for Lake's current state of grief. Nem finds herself unable to dispute this point, and the brief exchange appears to leave Lake a spirit. Wool, smiling, recess and TLS seem to relax, starting heavy loss when he asserted that they will soon secure lodging, but first, they must gather additional intelligence. Despite their awareness that their collective strength is sufficient to challenge the entire world, Light still believes they should proceed with prudence and avoid rushing into an unreserved conflict. Gold contour, emphasizing the importance of understanding one's adversaries as thoroughly as one understands oneself, to achieve victory without unnecessary complication. Light assent, suggesting they should first determine the capabilities of all the various nations. Furthermore, he suspects that there is also the realization that the clandestine organization, which had previously issued a death warrant for him, would go to such extreme lengths as to slaughter everyone in his village, ignites a furious rage within him, as he vows to raise the entire world to ashes, intent on eradicating all evil from its core. Nem is visibly shaken by the intense aura radiating from Light, but Gold intervenes to soothe him, advising him to control his fury while they are within the city, as they are not yet prepared to initiate a full-scale slaughter. This admonition jolts Light back to his senses, and he composes himself, then produces orator una pealim, sharp-edged small master. As they prepare to enter the city, they begin their flight towards Dagas. En route, Nem inquires about their strategy once they reach the city. Light explains that they must initially maintain a discreet presence to avoid arousing suspicion from the Concord of 12. And furthermore, they are required to register with the Adventurers Guild. Once their registration is complete, their objective is to elevate their party as rank as high as possible. As a higher party rank will grant them access to more intelligence, search from individuals seeking their assistance or those wishing to curry favor and protection. Gold comments the plan as excellent but question whether they should project on foot from this point, as fleeing would instantly make them conspicuous. Light agrees, and they descend to the ground, continuing their journey on foot. As they traverse the forest, they suddenly overhear a series of shouts emanating from ahead, and quickly discern that a group of dwarfs has encircled Ahmad and his daughter, poised to rob them. The dwarfs, spotting Gold as gleaming armor, demand that they reveal themselves. Light finally instructs his companions to handle these little maggots. Nem swiftly dispatches the dwarf, who are utterly stunned by the sudden turn of events, leaving them bound to gypsy in the forest. As a token of gratitude, the man offers them a ride to the city of Dagas. The young girl appears genuinely awestruck by their abilities, remarking that she has never before heard of a human defeating a dwarf in combat, and the man confirms that such powerful humans are indeed exceptionally rare. Gaetsan asks Light if they are a renowned adventuring party. Light candidly responded that they haven't even registered yet, a revelation that genuinely astonishes the man. Nevertheless, he informs Light Tade has arrived at an ideal location to establish a new party, as the city of Dagas is situated on the frontier of the Dwarven Kingdom, which itself borders both human and elven territory. This unique position fosters a vast array of dungeons and attracts a diverse population of adventurers to the region, leading to frequent conflicts but also significant tragedy. The city is particularly favored by humans. However, given that humans often face discrimination issues here, he personally operates an inn where individuals of all races are treated with equal respect. Like, and his party disembarked from the car at the town's entrance, expressing their gratitude to the man who introduces himself as Colonel and extends an invitation to his inn. Should they choose to stay overnight? Upon entering the city, we are immediately struck by its vibrant energy and splendor, with shops on every corner offering weapons and armor, and forges illuminating the street, where dwarfs tirelessly craft swords and shields. After absorbing the city as magnificence, they proceed to the Adventurers Guild, entering a spacious hall bustling with people gathered around quest border, like observes a significant number of human adventurers present. Yet he perceives that prejudice still lingers even within these walls, as humans differentially step aside for adventurers of other races. For the moment, Light chooses to disregard via and proceeds directly to the registration desk, where they are assigned rank F. Then becomes incensed, informing the woman at the desk that she ought to adjust her demeanor if she does the wish for someone else to do it for her. She instructs the receptionist to refuse the assigned rank, arguing that Light possesses immense strength and merits at least an S runner. The receptionist, however, remains entirely invasive, and shortly telah, named to step back with her smiley human self and accept the rank leave being given. Before Nem can return, Light intervenes, stopping her and offering an apology to the receptionist. Graciously accepting the rank, and he exits the building. Once outside, Nem begins to apologize profusely to Light for her outburst, but Light reassures her and tells her to calm down, and then leads his party to Colonel as in. Colonel is delighted to see them again and inquires how he may assist them. Light explains that he has an unconventional request, stating he wishes to lease the entire upper level of the inn for a full month, stipulating that no one, not even the inn staff, should be permitted access other than himself and his companion. He preemptively apologizes for an inconvenience this might cause but asserts its critical importance. He then produces a pouch overflowing with gold coins and offers it as payment. Colonel, however, declines, stating he would never accept money from someone who had saved his life. Leggett, nevertheless, insisted, and Colonel eventually relented, accepting the payment. Once they are on the upper floor, Light established various magical safeguards to ensure their privacy, then removed his mask and cloak to Ralaka. He was then reminded once more by Nam that he should have remained behind, allowing her own goal to handle the collection of all the intelligence gains here, considering an action log makes successfully strong. One can never be too cheerful. This statement deeply agitated Elijah, who rose from his position, questioning if Nam intended to deny him his vengeance, to prevent him from bringing those who obliterated his village and family to justice. The familiar, chilling aura of death and destruction once again enveloped him, driving Nam, who immediately prostrated herself on the ground, begging for forgiveness, and asserting that she had never wished to offend him. Light eventually composed himself and apologized to Nam, understanding that her sole concern was his safety. The following morning, he finally prepared to enter the dungeons. So, he dressed for the day and joined a lengthy queue leading to the dungeon as main entrance. While standing in this extensive line, three cloaked figures audaciously stood ahead of a group of young human adventurers. The sheer confidence with which they bypassed the line instantly conveyed to Light that these adventurers belonged to a different race. However, while every other human party was intimidated, Light spoke up, instructing the hooded men to return to their proper place in line. Just like everyone else, one of the cloaked individuals turned back, filled with anger and astonishment. Surprised that a human dared to address him, Light informed him that if he hailed from a noble lineage, he would likely prefer not to create a public disturbance. But the hooded individual appeared to have significant temper issues as he prepared to draw his weapon, only to be restrained by another member of his party. Trishon withdrew from the queue, but as he departed, the hooded man warned Light that their encounter was far from over. All the humans cheered for Light, admitting that he would never possess the courage to challenge Elder Ratchet, while the young adventurers in front of him inquired why she had not brought any provisions. According to them, this dungeon was exceptionally vast, and it could take several days for people to clear it. That's why adventurers consistently carry supplies so they can establish camps at night. Soon, they entered the dungeon and found themselves in an entirely new realm, teeming with its unique creatures and monsters. On Slate was certain no one was observing them. He utilized his concealment magic, followed by flight magic, enabling them to soar through the dungeons without attracting any attention. Meanwhile, deep within the jungle, the hooded individual removed his cloak, still sitting with anger over how that insignificant human had disrespected him. He unsheathed a massive sword from his back, shouting that his name was Kaido, the youngest elf ever to join the esteemed ranks of the elite White Knights, and that the blood of the master flowed through him. He furiously annihilated all the orcs, stabbing them in the hand, while the dark elf named Yo urged him to calm down. Kaido, however, remained furious because he was unable to increase his level, which appeared to be capped at 15. Yunten informed him that a typical elf usually reaches a cap at level 700, but Kaido was not content with this and vowed to himself that he would surpass this level, no matter what, back on the shortfall. And his party had already cleared this floor as well and decided to conclude their day, retrieving all the magic gems as proof of their level completion. Once they had gathered everything, they chose to return to the surface. Appreciating the beauty of this dungeon, they realized that without the ability to fly, it would have consumed a great deal of time just to travel from one floor to another. But thanks to their proficiency, they could clear multiple floors in a single day. While heading back, they noticed the young adventurers engaged in combat with a group of goblins. Light decided to observe them as they successfully eliminated all the creatures through effective teamwork. But Light immediately descended and slew a bushwhack that was stealthily approaching the mage gear at the rear. Light then addressed the young adventurers, advising them not to become overly focused on the immediate enemy and to always maintain awareness of their surroundings. The young individuals thanked him for his assistance, when suddenly, a pack of wolves emerged from the forest. The adventurers became frightened and wished to flee. But to prevent the blow such an attack, this is the However, all their questions were answered when an enormous mantis emerged from the forest, poised to destroy anything in its path. Only Light stood between the colossal monster and the lives of his youthful adventurers. The young adventurer, Krivit, stared at the mantis, their hearts pounding, desperately trying to formulate a plan on how they could escape this place alive. The leader of the group turned around and attempted to maintain a strong demeanor, but his voice betrayed him as he shakily instructed Mayan, the pink highest deal, to use her variable spell on the mantis to try and distract ini. Heijen turned towards Lake and pleaded with him to help them, as they could only survive this monster if they collaborated. You told Lake that they needed to somehow work together and trip the monster, which should provide them with enough time to flee from this location. Light looked at you, conscious, and aggressively titan to look the backs. The young boy looked at Layton, shocked, and screamed that, of course, They didn't want to hunt the beast because the beast was currently hunting them. Like then asked whether it would be acceptable if he killed the monster and claimed the loan. The boy believed Leitha lost his man and told him that his plan was ridiculous and the monster was far too powerful. They needed to escape as soon as possible and alert the guild about this exceptionally strong monster, as they must tell the Dumion immediately. Legend, however, simply smiled and told the boy not to worry and to simply step back. He turned towards Bull and Yang, both of whom looked at Tiger, to stretch their limbs, and claimed that they should be a good warm-up, since the mantis monster must be at least level 500. They were about to decide who would go first, but God decided to cheat and rushed towards the monster on his own. The mantis struck at him with its claws, but God blocked the attack with his sword before parrying every single strike that the mantis launched at him. These actions seemed to infuriate the monster, who smashed its claws into the ground while God jumped back to safety. He claimed that the monster took the full force of his attacks, and yet there was not even a scratch on it, which meant that Tosa's claws were incredibly strong. Nam made fun of him, claiming that God was weak and was merely fabricating excuses. Like decided to take his turn next and release the fired arrow card, which created a magic circle from which a huge fire blast launched towards the mermaid. To their surprise, the monster managed to deflect it back at Light and his party, who jumped back to dodge the explosion. The young adventurers were shocked to witness the caliber of spells being used in front of them, as they had never seen a player above level 100 before. The leader boy immediately turned towards Maya and told her to cast an explosion spell to help them, but the girl turned towards the boy and screamed at him that they were completely outmatched her. She claimed that Light had just used a very high combat class magic, and remarkably, without any spell casting or incantation, which was beyond incredible, as she had never witnessed anyone do anything like that before. The boy claimed that he didn't truly grasp the gravity of that, but all he knew was that he should help Lake's party. Gold overheard all that and chuckled, telling the young adventurers to stay back and enjoy the spectacle as they neared the Tolean first. Otherwise, he would be putting their lives at risk. For no discernible reason, he offered to instruct them in the art of knightly combat, encompassing both shield defense and sword offense. As he engaged the children in conversation, his back turned to the mantis. The creature seized the opportune moment to launch a surprise attack. The children watched in terrified silence, unable to utter a warning. But God required no assistance, effortlessly deflecting the soul with his shield. The block was executed with such precision. Had it utterly fractured the mantis' plano, eliciting a shriek of agony as blood erupted from its fur. Golden explained to the children that a precisely timed shield counter-strike often surpasses a sword attack in power, before swiftly pivoting. They shot the mantis unaware. Clearly severing one of its limbs, the children were left speechless by this exhibition of magic, prompting Light to showcase his own talents. Light once more deployed his fire arrow ability, which the mantis batted as it had previously. However, to the creature's astonishment, Light could manipulate the projectile as flight pathway. Harry directed it to strike the monster from behind, then proceeded to unleash a barrage of fire blasts, assailing the mantis simultaneously from every angle. This barrage utterly overwhelmed its senses and forced it to retreat. Maya was utterly astounded by this exhibition, having never before witnessed an individual manipulate the trajectory of their attacks. Laken, with precise control, struck the mantis with his fire arrows, causing one of its flanks to explode. Recognizing its inferiority, the mantis opted to flee to safety using its remaining appendages. Legend, however, perceived that the creature possessed more cunning than he had initially assumed. Nevertheless, its intelligence was irrelevant now, as there was no escape route. Like then unveiled his farewell card. He instantly conjured an immense barrier of furious fear, severing the monster as retreat path and compelling it to reverse direction. Maya was on small lead specials, realizing that Leigh had just deployed a tactical class magic without any chance or rituals, a feat she considered unprecedented. Light and his companions then advanced towards the mantis, poised to deliver the finishing blow. However, the monster had one final stratagem. It unfurled its wing and ascended into the air. Light understood that it might genuinely escape. Consequently, he opted to entrust the remainder to them. She promptly lifted skeward, brandishing her daggers, and dispatched the creature with a singular, spectacularly impressive strike, utterly obliterating the beast. She alleged, satisfied with her performance, but Gold abruptly brought her back to earth, pointing out that she had ruined all the valuable components she could have sold, merely to execute a flashy move. Nantan grasped the implications of her actions and began to apologize to Light, while the young adventurers remained rooted to the spot, too astonished to utter as soon as they tried to comprehend the spectacle they had just witnessed. Three adventurers had vanquished a level 500 mantis monster, an achievement they found utterly incredible, prompting them to question the true identities of these individuals. Light reassured them, telling her not to fret, since they would encounter and defeat more creatures during their journey. However, one of the young adventurers discovered the magic gem located at the monster core. This crucial piece of loot instantly uplifted them as spirits, as it signified their potential to advance in run. The leader of the junior adventurer Arthur and inquired if they were a renowned adventuring party, further asking if their rank was B, A, or F. Late Chalmers responded that they were merely novice adventurers, currently holding an F rank. This revelation left the young adventurers utterly dumbfounded, given that even their own rank surpassed F. Maya promptly conjured a sphere of water and offered it to Light and his companions, so they could refresh themselves. Light expressed gratitude for their kindness, but the junior adventurers explained that had it not been for Light and his group, they would likely have perished that day, at the mercy of the mantis monster. The leader of the adventurer subsequently extended an invitation for Light and his party to pass the night at their encampment. As dusk was approaching, and navigating the dungeons at night posed a significant peril, even for the most formidable adventurers. Furthermore, Maya was particularly eager to converse with Light regarding all the magic she had observed that day. Light chose to accept the invitation and joined them at their campsite, where they began to eat dinner. Maya began to inundate Light with various questions. When Light remarked that she appeared to be a capable mage herself, Maya promptly disagreed, asserting that she couldn't even perform basic combat class magic, let alone execute a spell without a vocal incantation. The other members of the party still failed to grasp the significance of the magic Light had demonstrated. This infuriated Maya, who then burst out at him, clarifying that there existed three advanced categories of magic. These included combat class magic, exemplified by fire arrows, designed for single target assault, and tactical class magic, such as the firewall Light had deployed earlier, which impacts a vast area simultaneously. And finally, strategic class magic, possessing a global reach and capable of summoning meteors, tsunamis, and earthquakes. However, these latter spells necessitate the combined efforts of multiple highly skilled mages to execute. She then stated that advanced class magic is typically commonplace for races such as elves, dragons, and beasts to wield. Yet, humans generally lack sufficient mana to employ them effectively, making like Esmer's ability to utilize such magic a remarkable feat in itself. The fact that he is casting vast advanced magical spells without an incantations is a legendary accomplishment. Both Gold and Nem concurred with Maya, acknowledging her apparent expertise. The young leader of the group revealed that Maya was his sister, and that she too possessed considerable magical talent, Wake explained her acceptance into the Duchy School of Magic. This institution as name resonated with legend, who inquired if it was the one situated in the region known as the Principality of Nain, a place where all rats are purportedly treated with equality. The boy affirmed this with a nod, but his gaze grew sorrowful as he disclosed that their parents had tragically succumbed during the recent epidemic. Consequently, Maya had never been able to attend. This was the very reason he had formed this party with his childhood companion Yi, to accumulate sufficient funds and enable Maya to attend the Duchy School of Magic. This narrative brought to light Esme, his own younger sister, and reassured the young adventurers not to be concerned, expressing his certainty that they would soon realize their ambition. With that, they concluded their evening. The following morning, they emerged from the dungeon laden with numerous high-level magic gem crystal, astonishing the receptionists. While the other adventuring parties pondered the identities of these newcomers, the receptionists cheerfully accepted their crystals and provided them with cash. After Wake 3 departed from the guild and began to stroll through the marketplace, every individual there seemed to recognize them as detail of an F-ranked party. Vanquishing a level 500 mantis monster had apparently disseminated with incredible speed. Light felt placed vital attention to your activity. However, they were abruptly approached by two women who inquired if they were indeed the individuals responsible for defeating the level 500 monster. Nam instantly unsheltered her dagger, demanding to know their intention. The men immediately recoiled, asserting their friendly disposition, and introduced themselves as Suvel and Gil. Gil then spoke, stating that they found the story rather unbelievable. This immediately resulted in Nam pressing her dagger against his throat, as she fiercely demanded to know if he was implying I was a prevaricator. Suvel urged her to calm down, explaining that they were all supporters of Lighted, as he had demonstrated that humans should not be underestimated at that very moment. Sub and Gil as group summoned him, so they wished Lake and his companions well before departing. Lake's party then promptly joined the crew. To re-enter the dungeon, there, they began to overhear members of other rats ridiculing the nausea that a human team had vanquished a mantis creature. Upon their return to the dungeon, they resumed their aerial journey, spotting Mayu and her companions traversing the verdant plains below. Light chose to halt and engage them in conversation. Mayu, with a touch of bashfulness, presented Light with a homemade salve, a remedy passed down from her grandmother, as a token of gratitude for his assistance. Light gladly accepted the offering, understanding how to reciprocate. He discreetly produced a magical chart and transformed it into a wristband. Before presenting it to Maya, Boy joyfully retrieved the present and vowed to cherish it eternally. Later that evening, as they soared through the heavens, Nam questioned why Light had bestowed such a potent artifact upon Maya. In return for a mundane, ineffective ointment, God chuckled at Nam's limited understanding, asserting that the sentiment behind the gift was paramount, and moreover, Light had given her an enchanted bracelet, capable of manifesting minor wonder if its wearer as desire is sufficiently strong. While such an artifact might hold little value for legs, for Maya, it could represent the crucial distinction between survival and the maze. Meanwhile, several days later, Light and his companions returned to the Adventurers Guild, where Nam insisted that the receptionist instantly elevated Light to S-rank, arguing he merited nothing less. The receptionist nervously informed her that such an immediate promotion was impossible due to the guild's established ranking structure. She reminded them that only a few days prior, they had made an unprecedented exception for Light, advancing him directly to the rank subsequent to his defeat of the Sedemantis. Nevertheless, the receptionist eventually succumbed to Nam's relentless bargaining, and considered that if Light could accomplish another significant exploit, he might indeed qualify for a further advancement. Light found this prospect appealing, and resolved to pursue a notorious adventurer hunter, known for exclusively preying on humanity. He informed Gold and name of his plan had evening, and they conjured that apprehending the adventurer hunter could secure him the desired promotion. However, they lacked an initial lead for their investigation as they were deliberating potential strategies, like abruptly observed an individual approaching their location. He promptly donned his mask, while his companions readied themselves for engagement. Subsequently, a portal materialized before them, and they kindly anticipated the emergence of an adversary. But to their astonishment, Maya tumbled out instead, like Chow with her, discovering she was bruised and utterly spent. Him, the bracelet her had previously given her, abruptly fractured, like gently placed Maya in bed, where she continued to mumble about the urgent need to relay all information to him. He first attended to her wounds, then resolved to delve into her memory to ascertain the circumstances of her current state. They uncovered that the previous day, certain adventurers had informed Maya's group about the adventurer killer who exclusively targeted humans. They urged the children to exit the dungeon without delay, a recommendation the party leader endorsed. The group promptly made their way towards the exit. Yet by nightfall, the hunt even reached the halfway point. The leader observed their collective exhaustion and pondered the safety of establishing a camp. When they encountered another group whose faces were entirely concealed, Maya suggested to her brother that he ought to question these individuals about the impending peril, and he proceeded to do so. Unbeknownst to them, they were conversing with the very adventurer killers themselves, who abruptly began to remark to one another that they should have been more thorough in concealing their tracks. The children had even grasped the implication of their words when the dark elf, John, began to mock them, labeling them as foolish. The party leader remained to their badges, whereupon Kaido unsheathed his sword, announcing that they were indeed the adventure killers, and that Maya's group would be their ultimate quarry for the day. The children finally comprehended they were confronting their past fears, yet even in that their instant, Maya's brother and his companion urged Maya to flee to safety while they attempted to impede the prejudiced assailant. They looked at Kaido, who was incensed by the audacity of mere human youths, even contriving the notion of nagging him in combat. He instantly struck down Maya's brother, and when the other two boys charged, he dispatched them just as ruthlessly. With a solitary blow, Maya was utterly terrified and heartbroken by this spectacle, but the boys were not yet prepared to yield. They rose once more, imploring her to escape and pursue her aspiration. They launched themselves at Kaido yet again, and they cut them down without hesitation. Maya's only reaction was a shriek of horror. Yuntan began to admonish Kaido, reminding him that he required the humans alive for his research. Kaido retorted that an insect audacious enough to challenge him would be relentlessly pursued, and then informed Yuntian he had, at the very least, sparred on it. Yun chose to overlook his transgression on this occasion, given the scarcity of human mages, and resolved to tackle Maya with. However, Kaido expressed a desire to amuse himself with her beforehand. John instructed him to proceed as he wished and then departed, leaving Maya utterly petrified. Kaido informed her that she should, in fact, be grateful, as a prospective legend such as himself was beginning to utilize a filthy human like her. Maya found herself unable to articulate even a single syllable. Yet, at that very moment, her brother struggled to his feet, urging her to escape. Yan was astonished by his resilience and conveyed to Kaido his strong desire to keep the boy intact for his experimental purposes. Nevertheless, Maya's brother understood that his chances of surviving his grievous wounds were virtually non-existent, and it was for this reason he unhesitatingly jeopardized his own life to protect his sister. He implored Maya to flee and live a full life, and in her desperation, She complete with his instruction. Yan instructed Kaido to apprehend her, but Kaido became infuriated, unwilling to accept commands from Anyone. He resolved to eliminate the boy first. Wu, surprisingly, began to echo goals as earlier pronouncements, muttering that combat was fundamentally about ingenuity and proficiency. Until he now had the opportunity to demonstrate his abilities. Kaido merely observed him muttering, deeming him unworthy of notice, when abruptly, the boy hurled his sword directly at his face. This maneuver caught Kaido by surprise. He somehow managed to evade the blow, but it was merely a feint, allowing the boy to then swing his shield at him, and send him sprawling to the ground. Kaido was incensed that a human had managed to wound his prey, and he instantly propelled a speck of pure white light directly through the boy's exchange. He began to advance towards the boy to deliver the finishing blow, but fortunately, Yan intervened, instructing him to pursue the fleeing Gilfish. Let's rise unalarmed, the enraged Kaido. Just to hide his sensible advice and gave chase to Maya, swiftly obstructing her escape pathetically, after but of time, based on others certain. You must learn proper decorum in the presence of the bearer of the legendary Elven Sword. You then conjured numerous blades of light, utilizing them as a makeshift staircase to the scan to the ground. Maya resolved to resist, unwilling to squander the opportunity her brother and friends had sacrificed their lives to provide it. She launched easy class at Kaido, who effortlessly deflected them. However, he grew irritated when Maya attempted to flee and slashed her leg, ensuring her inability to escape. He informed her that she will now be granted the esteemed privilege of gratifying a future hero such as himself. Maya retorted with scorn, asserting that he was merely a tormentor who really shot harming those less powerful than himself, and that if she had ever encountered an individual truly worthy of that title hero, it was life. Her declaration struck Kaido at his most vulnerable point, as he had been labeled a bully by his fellow Elfas throughout his entire existence. His anger flared when Maya branded him as pitiless coward, prompting him to unleash his luminous blades to end her. Maya desperately yearned for an escape, hoping to reach as he was her sole potential savior, and her bracelet transformed her desperate will into reality, teleporting her directly to his chamber. Now that light has been apprised of her complete narrative, her instructions and urging, and goal to depart without delay, meanwhile, back in the dunya. Kaido Lochatesia, who is standing to Maya as still living brother, the instant Yan spots Kaido. He questions him about Maya as whereabouts. Kaido replies that he presumed she had teleported there to rescue her sibling. Yeah, losing his composure at this news, demands of Kaido. How could a former member of the formidable White Knights be defeated by a mere human girl? Kaido, growing agitated, asserts that he was unaware that the girl possessed a teleportation artifact. Hearing this immediately causes Yan to panic. He realizes that if Maya reaches the guild and divulges everything, the Elven nation will swiftly uncover their actions, dispatching the White Knights to apprehend him and reclaim the legendary sword that Kaido pilfered. Kaido loses his composure upon hearing this. Understanding the immense power of the White Knight, Anton per Captain exceeds level 3,000. He begins to furiously stomp the ground in frustration. But Yan assures him that it's not yet too late. For if he completes his research, Kaido can break through his level cap and become more powerful than the White Knight's captain. Kaido's hopes are reignited. As Yan informed him, they need to find a secure location to commence his studies, but just then, light materializes, declaring that they won't be going anywhere. The elves recognize him from earlier, and wonder how he managed to appear behind them so stealthily. However, like Pai's team no man for no, Gulfir stands to the two boys, and then Gold brings the injured leader to him, remarking that his wounds were treated quite inadequately. The elves are astonished to realize the boy was spirited away from right under their noses. Without them teaching, Light quickly heals him. Then states that neither of the boys deserved his fate. He had let honestly fake and merely wished to accumulate an hegemony. To send Maya to the Magic Academy, but now it is too late. He must stand he could have become friend if circumstances had unfolded normally. And he is enraged that this potential was lost because of the elves. He vows to punish them for this, and then attempts to de-escalate the situation. By asserting that they are not criminals and that he had helped the boy after discovering him severely injured. However, Light reveals that Maya had indeed contacted him, and he no possesses full knowledge of their deeds. The two elves are thrown into a panic, but Light then reassures them that he has not yet informed the Guild. Kaido suddenly bursts into laughter upon hearing this, proclaiming it his fortunate day. For now he merely needs to eliminate Light, and then no one will ever discover what transpired here. Light becomes furious at this declaration, asserting that they will not permit the Guild to capture them, as they are his prey. He unleashes his formidable murderous intent, and informs the elves that he will tear them asunder with his bare hand. He then instructs N.A.T. and Goldthor, the main forces, then they combat, help advances for the others. And Kaido, incensed by his confidence, lunged at him, brandishing his sword with all his might. However, Light effortlessly parries the blow with his staff. Kaido is stunned by this, yet he persists in assaulting Light, who has no difficulty deflecting his attacks. Meanwhile, Yan is in utter disbelief, and Gold and Nem perceive Kaido as a mere pushover. Wu cannot even manage his fury during combat. Light, growing weary of his pitiful aggression, parries Kaido as subsequent assault, causing him to lose his footing. He then delivers a forceful blow directly to Kaido excusely, expelling all the aim from his lunge. He taunts the elf, remarking that he had anticipated a more formidable opponent. And this utterly exasperates Kaido. He receives and unleashes the complete might of his fabled sword, dispatching luminous blades towards Light. Light effortlessly evades the initial blade, but an icy crystal materializes at the point of impact on the ground. Light is taken aback by this phenomenon, and discovers that the magical blades launched by Kaido are imbued with various elemental properties. He begins to retreat, dodging the projectiles, and discerns that these attacks lack the potential to inflict harm upon him, even if he were to remain stationary. Abruptly, Kaido materializes behind him in mid-air and delivers a full force strike. But Light effortlessly parries the blow. Yan is now utterly incredulous, as no human or Chuba is capable of confronting a level 15 also as Kaido, but Light is distinctly dominating him. Kaido, equally exasperated, accuses Light of being a swordsman. While the chief's orders by donning match at him, he begins to throw a fit, labeling him a cheater. But Light retorts that he is, in fact, a mage. Kaido remains unconvinced, prompting Light to effortlessly conjure hundreds of ace swords in the sky, without uttering a single incantation. Kaido is visibly intimidated by this display, and in his desperation, he dispatches magical sword to assault Light, who meticulously counters each on, utilizing the easy class. Yan cannot trust his own eyes, as this fight is beyond the capabilities of even the most potent elven mages. Concurrently, Kaido persistently attempted to assail Light with his magical swords, but Light employs his Ichikos as a defensive barrier against all incoming attacks. Kaido begins to shout, claiming Light must be cheating, for he cannot possibly overcome the Holy Sword Grandiose, a divine gift bestowed upon an ancient maestro by the heavens themselves. Light is astonished by this revelation and inquires how Kaido possesses such knowledge. The conceited elf merely scoffs, stating that he is aware of it, due to the maestro blood flowing through his veins, leading people to refer to him as a sub-maestro. However, this concludes the video. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next installment.